All right. Well, welcome to day one. First attempt at trying this. So thanks for tuning in. Anyway, there was some interest potentially in kind of sharing my path to the Boston Marathon many moons ago. So let's get into it. So many of you may have run across a story several years ago about a crazy professor who lost weight eating kind of junk food and was dubbed the Twinkie diet by my friends at Good Morning America. So anyway, that's kind of what led to some of this and some of the dialogue back and forth to some colleagues and friends on Twitter. So here we are. So prior to that Twinkie diet, prior to the my 15 minutes of fame, I was a competitive runner. At least I claim that I was. Not, if I were to grade myself as a runner, I'd give myself as a B. Many people better than me. So, and I was blessed with some genetic potential. So that's kind of where I fall into that B category. Anyway, so just some history on my background. Ran high school, college, cross country and track. Cross country was my favorite. I liked, that was one of the things, and I've told my family this and my sons this. It was one of those things where I used running as a way to think and to kind of get my head straight. And so I would just kind of head out the door and go. And so there was kind of some mutual kind of mental therapeutic benefit that I really didn't understand at the time, but as a, 14, 15, 16-year-old. But then I also, as I got better, enjoyed it for the competitive part, and I got to thank my sister for kind of getting me into the sport in, I think, 7th grade. She was a few years ahead of me, I think. I was a freshman when she was a senior, but so when she started cross country, I was like, if she can do it, I can do it. Sorry, Steph. But so that's kind of what got me into it. And it was about my freshman year. I struggled in high school. I thought, man, this, it's middle school, high school, thinking you're better than you are when you go from 8th grade, you go up to the next level. It's like, a little humbling experience. So, but it was during that freshman year that there was a transition physiologically, metabolically, et cetera, that shifted, in which, hey, my body caught up to the training I was doing. So thanks, Coach Shrug. Coach Krubb is my college coach. And things started clicking. So anyway, that's my history. That's kind of what got me started. So once I got better, once I pushed through the difficult aspect of running, which if you're watching this, you probably have experienced it at some point yourself. And then all of a sudden, kind of, hey, your body adjusts and you get more efficient, that kind of thing, and it becomes more enjoyable. And my thoughts go out to those of you who have tried to get there and haven't. But that's one reason why some people kind of stick with it. Anyway, so back to the point at hand, qualifying for Boston. Master's degree, exercise science, PhD, exercise physiology, postdoc in geriatric nutrition. And I ended up being in Little Rock, Arkansas, or living in Maumelle, working in North Little Rock, eventually Little Rock, Arkansas. I had the fortunate opportunity to run with the Little Rock Roadrunners. So prior to that, I really didn't have much aspirations to run a marathon, and had shifted to the triathlon post-collegially. And and doing an Ironman really wasn't on my to-do list. I didn't put that on my bucket list, but getting to Little Rock, and so getting into the professional side of my life, shifting from a collegiate athlete to a semi-pro, if you want to call it that, athlete, in running. I'm not sure if there's actually a semi-pro thing, but anyway, living in that limbo area, I found myself gravitating towards triathlon. But then when we got to Little Rock, the time to be a triathlete and just managing the practices just wasn't in the cards. So went back to basically just running. And the Little Rock Roadrunners, Brian Polanski, David Williams, Bill Torrey, all those guys just took me under the wing, and and they were marathoners for the most part. They're long distance runners for the most part, half marathon. That's what they did, and so it took about a year, but it eventually worked with me. And so then it's like, this was 1998. Y2K came along. I don't know if many of you remember Y2K. That was when the world was going to end, and we didn't know if the computers would be able to switch, but here we are. And so that kind of got on my radar, and I knew my postdoc was nearing. I was about halfway through my postdoc. Well, it ended up being closer than halfway through, but it's a story for a different day. Because my mentor took another position that I didn't know when that was going to happen, but that did happen at the time, which is fine. I have and he invited me to come along. So, so about 1999, I said, hey, let's try this Boston thing. And so then I looked up. At the time, because I've checked since, I wouldn't have qualified now like I did then. Now I'd have to run a 3-hour marathon. Then I had to run I think 3:10. That was my goal. So that kind of sets the tone. And so, just to kind of give a little bit more background, I ended up went through some of this stuff here. Sorry, I'm still getting used to the whole camera thing, obviously. And ended up getting married in 1995 to my wonderful wife, and could not have done it without her either. So then we moved to Arkansas in 1998. So we lived in Maumelle. And so for those of you that know that area, you know it pretty well. But my wife worked at UCA, University of Central Arkansas. I worked at the VA hospital in North Little Rock, and then moved to UAMS, the UAMS campus, shortly thereafter, right before heading to Kansas State. So we lived in between both of our jobs. So that's also kind of a critical part, just because of the drive and timing and all those things. And Maumelle is kind of a bedroom community. Great place to live, by the way. Arkansas in general is a great place to live, but Maumelle especially. And so that kind of affected kind of some of these decisions too. So the basic principles, so to get back to kind of qualifying for Boston, the basic principles, similar, regardless of who you kind of follow. The goal is to increase the capacity to run faster and maintain velocity, in this case for marathon, for 26.2 miles. How you do that is a little bit different. Different people have different philosophies. And bear in mind, my goal was to qualify for Boston and run Boston, not to race. My goal wasn't to get top whatever. It was to qualify. So for this video, it's to qualify and to run a 3:10 marathon. And so that's kind of what this is based on. There are people whose goals, and we'll get to some of those here in a minute, whose goals are to be faster. And there are some who just, you know what, I'm running this marathon to finish. Both of those are fantastic goals. My goal is kind of in between, qualify for Boston, which is obviously, for those that have tried, a challenge in and of itself. And so that's kind of where I was. That was where my mentality was. That's where my training was. The other aspect was I had life issues. And in actually preparing for this video, I've kind of changed how most of us talk about that balance, or at least me used to, as work-life balance. I'm just flipping it up and I'm calling it life-work balance. Some of you may have already been there, but putting work first. Not that I don't like my work, and not that I don't enjoy my work, and not that I don't put effort into that. It's a part of life. Therefore, I think it should fall in the equation second. So, with more emphasis on life than work. Obviously, work is a part of that. Anyway, so my mentality of this is different. So that gets back to kind of the root issue. We'll touch on this at the end too. Is you've got to figure out what works best for you. You're going to see a lot of ways to do things. I'm going to share one and why I chose what I chose. But ultimately, you need, and so hopefully this may get at some of your issues, and you may say, yeah, no, that's not for me. Or it's like, oh, that's interesting. I never thought of that way. Maybe I'll look into that. I have some of those similar resources, and this may work for me. Perfect. Either way, you need to find your way to do it. So one aspect, so the metabolism and physiology aspect is ultimately we need to be able to do more work at this, or run faster, run at a higher velocity at the quote unquote same heart rate, same relative intensity as before. And so we need to increase enzymatic capacity as well as physiologic capacity. And so increasing mitochondrial density, increasing the efficiency of the heart function, cardiac output, VO2, those types of things. And then there's a psychological component of, you know what, I've got to be able to do this for, and in the case of qualifying, I had to be able to do it, run at a certain pace, which I think was about 7:15 for 3 hours ish. Obviously 3:10 is where the cutoff would be. And so those are all the components. So that gets to, we need to expect to experience some discomfort in all those aspects, or you won't change. You won't get faster. You won't be able to do it unless you can already do it now. So as we'll see here shortly, that's the case for some people. They can already do it, and that is run a 3:10. And so if their goal is to run 3 hours, maybe even slower. So some examples of the training decisions. So the principles that guided the program that I chose, one was time efficiency, and that was one thing. So I either ran at lunch, typically over lunch hour. At the time, I was managing some randomized clinical trials, and so that sometimes didn't happen over lunch. It may have been at the end of the day, and so my work schedule was typically 6 to 7 a.m. to 3 to 4 p.m. And so sometimes earlier, depending upon the testing that had to be done, or if we had overnight subjects that were staying overnight at the facility. But nonetheless, so it was either over lunch or around that 3 o'clock time point. And again, to qualify, I chose the Arkansas Marathon, and which was at the time near the end of September. So that meant this was taking place in Arkansas, the training basically over the summer. And knowing Arkansas, it's warm. And so a lot of this took place inside and on a treadmill. So that's part of the decision I made, was to do a lot of treadmill work. Being with the Little Rock Roadrunners, they did a track workout. That would be at night. So that would be, I can't remember what time they was, like at 5 or 6 p.m. And then they would run a long run on Sunday, a long paced run on Sunday mornings. And so those were kind of 2 scheduled runs. Then everything else filled in after that. It was typically on a treadmill. Sometimes I would run outside on purpose to get ready for the heat. And so I would do, and I would do that over noon when I had that time. just to expose myself to and to better tolerate heat. And that's one thing, after having lived in Arkansas, I will not complain about the heat or humidity. And I hope I haven't since, because it's being in Kansas and anywhere else, the South it's a whole different level of humidity. Anyway, if you know, you know. So I also wanted to share, so that was kind of my philosophy. And so what I also got into, getting back to the program that I chose. So I was running about 40-ish miles a week, maybe 60. And I didn't really periodize things that much, because I put other life issues and work ahead of this goal, and I fit this goal into everything else. And so there were days I had to make adjustments to my running schedule that I'd planned. So it was kind of third or fourth on the list of life issues that I was working around and juggling. And so wife life came first, home life, and work second. Sometimes, you ask my wife, she probably would have said work was first. Touche. But anyway, so that kind of set things. And the other thing was, I focused on quality of effort. So I had basically an hour to get things in. So my long runs, so that's, one of the big things here, one of the big things, no single runs longer than 11 miles. That was my longest individual run. And so how do you run a marathon without running 16, 17, 20 miles, 2 hours, etc.? I did it. And that's one of the things, again, one of the other issues there. With that, it's experience and being able to check in and know one's body. And so Seth James Damore, so it's somebody, just in preparing for this, found some examples of what other people have done. And then I'll share those with you now. Roll film.
Distance. Now, in my training, why I strive for that 2 hour plus training session often, not just once a week, but throughout the week, is because I am striving to increase what is called your cardiac efficiency. You're going to hear me talk a lot about that tonight. So your cardiac efficiency is really improved when you start approaching and then push through that 2 hour window in a given training session. And yes, today's run, I was able to hit that 2 hour mark, exactly 2 hours and 2 minutes, or 17 miles, 27 kilometers, 4:30 per kilometer, or 7:15 per mile. Now, my goal in Amsterdam, and in case you didn't know, I'm trying to hit a qualifying time for the Olympic trials in Atlanta. So the Olympic trials for the marathon is in February 2020 in Atlanta. So I need to run under 2 hours and 19 minutes to be invited to go race this Olympic trials qualifying race in Atlanta, which has just been like a lifelong dream. It's just absolutely crazy that I might be able to do it. That is the goal. So I'm trying to run faster, race faster in Amsterdam. Now, as you've probably figured out, my training definitely emphasizes aerobic, steady state training way more than anaerobic or interval training, especially for a marathon. If I was getting ready for a 10K or a 5K or even to a half marathon, I'd be training quite a bit differently as far as adding more speed. But for a marathon, I'm going for that aerobic, steady state training often. Why? Because I am trying to increase the volume of blood that my heart can pump and the speed at which that blood can be pumped and delivered throughout my body. And one more point on the anaerobic side, I think anaerobic training is important, developing or going into oxygen debt and creating lactic acid through our training to get used to that. But frankly, our body's ability to recover, if you only have a given amount of days to train for a marathon. You know, whether you're in a 12-week training plan, a 10-week, sometimes people only do an 8-week training plan. There's only so many days when you're talking about the need for long runs, the need for recovery days, the need for a tempo or threshold day. So I do not emphasize anaerobic training as much because my body's ability to recover from that type of training to get ready for what I consider to be more important, aka the 2 hour plus training sessions. That is why I don't emphasize it in my personal training.
All right. So what Seth kind of goes through, he has a 2 hour principle that he focuses on in his runs, and he's also running 100 plus miles a week, you know, in his training program for the Amsterdam, trying to qualify for the Olympic trials, you know, included some really long weeks in which he was running over 100 miles, 120 miles a week. And so to do that, you to have that kind of goal, his goal is different. And so again, so it's just to kind of show that we all come from this at different perspectives. And so if there's something and you're struggling and you're running, you may want to say, hey, what about trying something different? Do I need to do this? What if we tried this? And you know, the other aspect too is working with a coach like Seth or others, it doesn't matter. Because having a coach is beneficial. Another thing, going back to my principle of my program, is keeping it simple. I didn't want to do a lot of calculations. I didn't really want to devote a lot of time to specifying, okay, I need to do 3 mile repeats, descending with this amount of rest and trying to keep track of everything. I just wanted to, okay, what am I doing today? 10 times 1,000 meters every 5 minutes. Done. Got it. And then with a goal of X pace, 3 minutes, 3:20, whatever the case may be, keeping it simple. Or a tempo run, heart rate at 160 the whole time, just keep it there, go, and those types of things. And so that was another thing for these things, is having a coach makes things simple. And that's where I realized, you know what, if you can afford a coach and to go that route, huge. And then you trust, there has to be a lot of trust in that. But it makes a huge difference, because like, hey, what am I doing today? Okay, good, got it. Or this week or whatever, so you can plan it and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, so that's one example. And so then the next person's Reed Fisher and the 10-man elite program. I like that, because what this clip will show is just it's a similar kind of thing. It's, instead of kilometers, they were doing mile repeats anyway. So I'm going to just clip to that and then I'll come back.
Working with Coach Hunter for the first time was really fun. I think she's the type of person who's just like a lifelong learner and really wants to make sure that, she doesn't get stale in her coaching and in her life in general. And so working with someone like her who'd never really coached anybody for a marathon before, let alone an elite marathon, was something that we talked through a lot before the build-up. And we were both very transparent about the fact that we both had a lot to learn. One of the things I'm most appreciative about Coach Hunter for is that she's always willing to evolve and learn and change and experiment. And it's not like I'm just going to be doing the same marathon build-up that I did from Chicago here in the Boston build-up and rinse and repeat every marathon I run for the rest of my career. Like, we're going to be trying new things and exploring and taking risks and seeing what works and what doesn't. So yeah, I think, Chicago was great, and it was good to get a mark on the board and kind of prove to myself that I had what it takes to compete at that level. And now the next big step is going to an even bigger stage in Boston and in a marathon that, people train for a lifetime to be able to compete at. And I'm really excited to just see how I stack up in probably the best field ever assembled in Boston from a domestic and international standpoint. I'm still relatively young for a marathoner. I'm 26, so just getting out there and running hard. And the beauty about being a bit of a young gun and having this only be my second one is that I get to take some chances in the build-up and on race day. And if they pay off, it's going to be a huge day for me. And if they don't, then we've got years ahead to go back to the drawing board and make sure we get things dialed in so that I do have that big day.
Caught on camera. All right, so Reed and Brogan and Aaron are all doing 5 to 7 by mile at threshold effort / pace. So we'll probably start a little slower than that and then just work down towards 5-minute pace, maybe a little bit under. Then after that, we're gonna head over to the hill and run 45-second hills, and then they're gonna go till they get to about 90 minutes total.
What's sort of the goal for this early section of Reed's marathon build-up?
We're just gonna start with building basic stamina, doing some threshold work, and extending the length of some of his reps. Right now he's not doing any reps longer than a mile, but we will start doing that. We'll just do a similar progression that we did last time. We'll have some tempo runs at the end of long runs and just try to get really comfortable at 5-minute pace basically here at altitude.
All right, so you'll see that they have 90 minutes. I didn't have 90 minutes. So I did less, so I would do what they might do in miles, I might do in kilometers, just to keep the time simple. So those are just some examples of people who have done some things, and just to show that how people get to where they are is going to be different. We all have different experiences, we're all unique. So then the Arkansas Marathon, not the best kind of choice to qualify, probably not the fastest course. That is, from a PR perspective, if you were to run 2 races, one on a flat course, one on that course, the flat course is probably going to come out a little faster. You have heat and you have hills to worry about. But you know what? Both my coaches, Coach Crubb and Coach Strog and Coach Williams, it was being mentally tough was huge. And so I said, you know what? Hey, if I'm going to qualify, I'm going to qualify. I'm not going to let a course dictate whether or not I qualify. Now, you tell me to run Pikes Peak, I may have a different answer for you, but I'm also 52 now versus 28 at the time. I think I was 28, something like that. Anyway. So the other aspect too is, in both marathons, Boston, I've only run 2, Boston and the Arkansas Marathon, I don't remember much. From the Boston perspective, what's really funny is people will say, the Citgo sign, I was just looking for that Citgo sign. I don't remember the Citgo sign, and the Citgo sign is like 1 mile by 1 mile. It's not that big, but it's a huge sign. And so, but there are a few places in the Arkansas Marathon that really stood out. One was at around the 9 or 10 mile mark. It was just a nice smooth downhill, and I remember feeling good. That was kind of a check-in point for me. It's like, all right, is this going to be possible today or not? Kind of a thing. It's kind of a no go. How I feel, and I felt, it's like, feel really good. The sun hadn't really come up too much yet. Wasn't hot yet, which came later. And then they're at about the 16, 17, 18 mile mark. And this was in Melbourne. It's now in Boonville, or Malvern. So if you've run the Arkansas Marathon, you're thinking, oh, what he's talking about is not true. This was 23 years ago. On a different course. And than it is now. And at around the 16 mile mark, there was some interesting hills that short, kind of steep, that I just remember had to do a little bit of work to get up, but it was just different than when I'd been used to, and it's kind of a different part of the course. The other aspect too for this race, remember I was just planning to qualify. And so what I chose to do, this is a race strategy, maybe something you want to consider, maybe not. But one thing I built into my race plan was at the 20 mile mark, I was going to walk for a minute.
Wait, what?
Of the last mile. And so I had planned in the times that I needed to check in at basically every 6 miles. And so when I got to 20, and at that time the Arkansas race, and there was a local runner who was not running in that particular race, kind of calling out, helping people kind of figure out where they were in the race. And so I think I was around 5th, which for that race, I don't know if that's good or bad. Anyway. And so I got to the 20-mile mark, kind of where I wanted to be, maybe a little few minutes faster, maybe. And so I walked a minute and then ran. And so the goal was to run at about 6:45, 7-minute pace up to that point. And then, so I built in, 7:30, 8-minute pace. I think it ended up being 8 minutes with the walk built in for those last few. And so I'd walk I didn't want to cramp. I didn't want to really collapse or hit the wall per se. And so I wanted to kind of ease into it. So, and my goal is just to finish in under 3:10, just to qualify. So built-in walks the last 6 miles, got to mile 24, changed my mind and kind of ran through the last 2. And not that was good or bad, but the competitive side of me kind of kicked in a little bit. And I felt it the last mile, last 1.2, but finished in 3:07 something and change, and was able to qualify. So, the key there is no long runs more than 11 miles. And I guess I need to touch back on that. The reason for that, I had built in 15 to 17 miler in my schedule for that day. I ended up cutting it short because my mom was coming to town. And by the time I left and we got things ready and doing things around the house, etc., I had to cut it short. And so I only ran 11 that day. It was a paced run. And so I ended up cutting it short. I ended up going back out later that day for another 4 or 5. So that day I did do 15 or 16, but no continuous runs of more than 11 miles. And some other aspects too that I used to help prepare me for that race, and that was, I think, somewhat significant for me mentally, was I would register for some local races, 5Ks, 10Ks. I think I did 2, one of each, and I would run at a high velocity or a high pace, basically race pace, for several miles before the race. And so I'd come into the race with a little bit of fatigue, so that, and with a different mentality. I was racing for a marathon, not that day's race. And so that helped me separate as a competitor. Sometimes we get caught up in going with the flow, going with everybody else. And so this helped me back off, realize, hey, remember, you just ran 4, 5, 6 miles. So bear that in mind. Use this to pace, to work, do well, but not get caught up into the 5K. And I'm not here to race the 5K. I'm here to prepare for qualifying for Boston. And so that really helped me separate myself from run your race and to focus on that. And I think, and that's kind of the first time I've ever done that. I mean, many of you have probably said, I've been doing that for years. I was slow to that game. So anyway, so summary there is find the path that works for you. It may be doing Hal Higdon plan. It may be doing Seth James Demore. It may be doing Tim Annelite, whatever. It may be doing a Rosencrantz plan. Shout out to the Rosencrantzes. Whoever. Trust your plan. Talk about things that work for you. Make it individual. Just because it works for somebody else does not mean it's going to work for you. I think most people would say not doing a long run before a marathon, especially if you're trying to qualify for Boston, is stupid. Yeah, maybe. On that note, something else stupid I did was, so the day before, well, I don't know if it was the day. It was the week before we left for Boston. Bill Rogers. So I got to meet Bill Rogers, race against him. I may do a separate story here. Gosh dang it. Anyway, I was able to meet Bill Rogers, and he was at a local running store, and I bought a new pair of racing shoes just for Boston. And people said, don't buy a new pair of shoes for a marathon. I did it, and raced in them. That was the first race I did. I had run in them a few times, but never raced, never did a long run, and I did fine. So again, part of that's experience and knowing what shoes fit you, what shoes will work, what shoes won't, when you try them on and test them out. So anyway, so there's some things that people say don't do. Now, if you do that, if you go out and you get blisters, don't come back to me and say, why did you suggest that? I'm not suggesting it. I'm just saying, you know yourself, you know what you can do. Because I think I ran in Brooks Beasts, I think, at the time, which are heavy shoes. Is it Brooks Beasts or GT 2000s? That's what I raced in. I didn't have and so I wanted something lighter. So I think I went with the Asics, it wasn't Brooks. It was an Asics. I can't remember what they were. They were the sturdy Asics back in the day. I can't remember what they are. I'll have to look, and I'll put it up in the thing here. But I went with a GT Light, I think, at the time. Or one of the lighter Asics shoes. Not one of the racing shoes, but something a little lighter. But anyway, so thank you. I hope this was helpful for you. Hope it was interesting, preferably both. And good luck with your journey, your life journey. Whether it's dealing with cancer, dealing with diabetes, dealing with life issues, mental health issues, racing issues, running issues, work issues, whatever. I wish you the very best. Take one day at a time and be well, and go get them.